Are you ready to read? All right, chapter 2. Here we go. Geography is the last class of the day. Ben stares out the classroom window as the rain beats against the glass. He can hear it on the roof, too, and see it making puddles on the playground. It rained or snowed or sleeted just about every day since he moved to Massachusetts. Mrs. Kutcher holds up a piece of paper. This is the most important project of the year, she says. We've been studying different ecosystems and biomes all year, and now you get to choose your favorite one. You'll need to use your reading and writing and research skills and everything that you've learned about different ecosystems. You'll have 2 months to do it, but you should start working on it now. A project this big can't be done at the last minute. Mrs. Kutcher gives the first person in each row a stack of information to pass back. Ben stares at Jenny's long black hair as he waits. It's always straight and neat, like she brushes it 1,000 times every morning. Jenny takes a sheet and then turns to hand the stack to Ben with a smile. She has a gap between her two front teeth that makes her smile look relaxed and friendly, which seems different from her neat combed hair. Jenny turns back and picks up the book that she was reading. She's a book sponge. Some kids read one book like every 2 weeks. She reads one every other day. In fact, she reads so much that she gets in trouble for it, which seems pretty silly to Ben. Teachers are always telling you how important reading is, and that when you actually read a lot, you get in trouble for it. But Jenny's head is always buried in a book, and it's usually a book that doesn't have anything to do with what they're studying. Mrs. Kutcher almost always has a book on her desk that she's taken away from Jenny during health or geography or even reading. Jenny's smart in a very weird way. Not in the way of always doing exactly the right thing in school, but she's smart in seeing the world in a way that others don't. Like she has her head tilted to one side a little and just looks at everything with a different perspective. Jenny turns back to Ben, still wearing her gap-toothed grin. "What did Mrs. Tibbets say to you?" she whispers. Ben shrugs. "Did you get in trouble?" Ben shakes his head. "I don't think so. It seemed like she was mad, but then she didn't do anything. She told me not to touch the mice. I wonder what she uses them for. My brother." "Excuse me, Jenny." Mrs. Kircher interrupts their conversation. "Could you please turn around and pay attention? I'm not just talking to hear my own voice." Jenny gives Ben another quick smile and turns around. Ben feels his face turning red. He looks at the assignment sheet. Geography project. Exploring world ecosystems. Your major report for the spring will be on an ecosystem anywhere in the world. In the report, you will explain the following: what and where the ecosystem is, what the climate is like, which plants and animals are part of it, how it fits in with other ecosystems of the world. Please also discuss what makes this ecosystem a unique place and what threatens it. The report should be 3 to 5 pages in length. Please include artwork, charts, or models that will help us understand the special nature of your habitat. You may choose your own topic or ask me for help in selecting one. The project is due Friday, June 5th. Ben knows right away what topic he wants to do. Other kids are looking at their papers, and some are already waving their hands in the air. Mrs. Kutcher, can I do the rainforest in Costa Rica? Jenny asks. The teacher nods. That's what I wanted to do, someone whines without waiting to be called on. 3 or 4 other kids join in, like the rainforest is the only interesting place in the world. Frank Murley shouts out, I want the beach, where I can see bikinis. His buddies break out laughing. Mrs. Kutcher shoots Frankie a look, but he doesn't seem to care. He's scored points with his friends. Ben isn't interested in the rainforest or the beach. He shoots his hand up in the air, and Mrs. Kutcher calls on him. Can I do the desert? He asks. The Sonoran Desert in Arizona? Sure, said Mrs. Kutcher. You must know a lot about that already. Ben nods. Who ever heard of a snoring desert? Frankie shouts, and the same crew of boys snickers. So Noren. Ben pronounces the word slowly. It's the name of the desert around where I lived in Tucson. So Noren, snoring, Frankie sneers. Whatever. It's all he ever talks about. Who cares about the Tucson anyway? Ben pretends he didn't hear. Jenny looks back at Ben and rolls her eyes. He shrugs. He wonders if it's true. Is that all he talks about? Maybe so, he thinks. And it's no wonder. Tucson sure was better than here, especially with kids like Frankie around. Finally, he sneaks a glance at Frankie, who's smirking with his friends. Tommy Miller reaches across the aisle and gives him a high five. Jenny's mouths these words to Ben. He's an idiot. Mrs. Kutcher raises her voice, trying to get the class back on track. That's enough for now. I'll have a little conference with each of you to find out what you'd like to do. I have a list of ecosystems, and I'm sure each of you can find an interesting one that no one else is doing. She looks at the clock and says, Okay, class, pack your things. It's nearly time to go. All the way to the snoring desert, Frankie taunts. You can't win with Frankie, and Ben knows it. He keeps his mouth shut and concentrates on stuffing his notebooks and books in his backpack. By the time Ben gets on the bus, most of the seats are taken. All the 5th graders are in the back of the bus, where they always sit. Ryan's back there too, and calls to him. But Ben chooses a seat halfway back with a 3rd grader that he doesn't know. Ben's sister Agatha is on the bus too. She's sitting in the front with Roy, Ryan's sister. They're both in 2nd grade. Agatha and Roy are laughing and talking while the kids in the seat behind them as the bus pulls out of the school circle, and Ben wonders, why was it so easy for his sister to make friends? It's like she lived in Edinburgh forever. Maybe it's because she talks so much. Ben looks out the window. He doesn't see that much point in talking, unless it's something important. At about the third stop in the route, Ryan lurches down the aisle, and when he gets to Ben's seat, he peers at him with his good eye. "See you tomorrow, Ben." Ben nods and then quickly looks out the window again. Then Ben hears Frankie's voice. "Arr, Captain Kidd! Captain Kidd! Goodbye, Captain Kidd!" Ben can't help but look back. Frankie's got one hand over his eye like a patch. A couple of the boys are laughing. Ben turns in time to see Ryan get off the bus, and his head is down, his ears bright red. Frankie and his buddies are already ragging on one of the fourth graders. When the bus comes to a stop near the end of Ben's street, he steps out the door into the drizzling rain. Agatha is waiting for him at the bottom of the stairs. "Come on, Ben, let's run." "I'm not running. You can if you want." "But Mom says we have to walk together," Agatha says in that little whiny sister voice she was born with. "Then we can walk," Ben answers. "But we'll get wet." "Agatha, go ahead and run if you want. I'm walking." "Poop head," his sister says, and she whirls around and takes off down the street. Ben holds his backpack on top of his head to keep the rain off, and he plods toward the house. The entire sky is gray, and some of the puddles on the street are deep. His feet get wet, even though he's watching where he's stepping. The grass in the yards is beginning to turn green again, but there are no leaves on the trees yet. He peers up at them from under his backpack. The tree branches hang over the street. There are tons more trees here than in Arizona. He tries to imagine all the branches filled with leaves. Ben cuts across a yard to avoid a big puddle on the sidewalk. The ground is like a soaked sponge. The water wells up around his shoes. The smell of the wet earth fills the heavy air. He's never seen this much water lying around before. The desert has gentle rains in the winter and hard, huge thunderstorms in the summer. But the rain soaks into the dry earth or runs off in a matter of hours. It never stays around for this long. Ben used to love the big thunderstorms. He could always smell them coming. The wind whipped out in front of them as the storm rolled across the desert floor and the clouds rose higher and higher in the sky. Out there, everything was races and crashes and breaths like a living thing. But here in Massachusetts, the rain just goes on and on. Nothing very exciting about that. Thinking about the thunderstorm reminds Ben of the things from his bedroom that got lost in the move. He had collected most of them himself, but some of the best stuff had been given to him from the Desert Museum. Mr. Thompson had given him a rabbit skull and a fossil of a trilobite, a sea creature from millions of years ago. But his favorite thing was the shed skin from a king snake. Ben had watched the snake in the display case at the museum for over an hour while it wiggled out of its old skin and left it behind. Its head and body emerged with a new skin that was bright and shiny and vibrant. It was one of the most amazing things that Ben had ever seen. Mr. Thompson gave him the old, dried, crinkly skin that stretched out even longer than the 3-foot snake itself. But it wasn't just the displays or the creatures of the museum that made it so great. Even better were all the things he learned about the desert. And the more he knew, the more he wanted to know. Every time he went to the museum, he peppered Mr. Thompson and the other guides with 1,000 questions. Ben, his mother had said, you'll drive them crazy. But Mr. Thompson and the others seemed happy to share what they knew. That's what we're here for, the old man had said. The guides taught Ben to be watchful and patient when he was outside. Nature shows itself when you give it time. There are a lot of critters out there, Mr. Thompson had said, and you'll see them if you know how to be still and wait. Ben had learned how to be patient. In Arizona, he'd grab a snack after school and then walk down to the river, washed out at the end of the street. There were new houses going up, but behind them was just an open space, the desert stretching out and going up into the foothills of the mountains west of Tucson. And after the area's big thunderstorms, the river ran through the wash, creating a lush place for trees and plants that wouldn't last a week in a dry ground 100 yards away. But Ben's favorite thing waiting at the place in the big river wash? A big rock in the shade of a cottonwood tree. He would sit there, not moving at all, and after a while, he'd see something. Mice were regulars, ground squirrels and lizards. Sometimes he saw javelinas, small wild pigs snorting and scurrying from one bush to another. The more he watched and waited, the more animals he saw and learned to identify. One Saturday, when he was home, he heard his mother give a little yelp as she walked into the laundry room, and Ben ran to see what was wrong. "It's a frog!" And she pointed to the corner. Ben looked closely. "No, Mom, it's a toad," he said. "It's a Colorado River toad." "I don't care what it is," his mother said. "I don't want it anywhere near my washing machine." The large, squat toad sat in the corner looking perfectly happy to be there. "He won't hurt anything," Ben said. "He'll eat the spiders." Ben talked his parents into leaving the toad there for several days. He was happy, and so was the toad. But his mom wasn't. Ben finally, carefully scooped it up into a box and took it back down to the river wash and let it go. "Ben's toad removal," his father had quipped. In Arizona, Ben spent about as much time as outside as he could. Most of the kids from school were busy doing other things, either playing sports or staying inside with their computers and TVs. But Ben didn't really like team sports, although he was big for his age and people always wanted him on their teams. And he couldn't stand spending too much time inside. It made him feel like he was wasting the day or wasting the sun. He liked being outside by himself or with someone who liked the outdoors as much as he did. Toby was the only other kid he knew who was happy about spending the day exploring the nearby desert. Ben and Toby had started a collection of things they'd found. They got a terrarium and put things in it and named it Desert World. They filled the bottom with sand and some rocks and then planted some small cactuses and turned it sort of into an ant farm. An ant and stink bug farm, actually. Ben loved catching stink bugs, funny little critters that lifted their back ends high in the air when they thought they were being attacked. But the main inhabitant of Desert World was Lenny, a western banded gecko. Toby and Ben had spent hours watching the small, quick lizard as it scurried around in its little home, dining on the stink bugs and grasshoppers that they fed it. But Ben had to leave all of that behind in Tucson. And now Toby was caring for Lenny and everything else in Desert World. Maybe, Ben thinks, maybe the moving people have found the box and I'll get my collection of rocks and bugs back and my books and posters. Okay, so in chapter 2, we learn a little bit more about Ben's life back in Arizona. We learn a little bit more about things that he loves, and we learn a little more about his interests and his hobbies. And as you can see from the way that chapter 2 ends, Ben is very homesick. So maybe this project that he has at school, maybe getting the chance to research the desert and do a special project on it, maybe that will be a good way for him to not feel as homesick. So we'll have to read some more in chapter 3 to find out what happens next.